Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to this really special moment for us all, where we are going to witness the launch of a very important study that we've been working on for nearly the last 10 months or more, but actually highlights work that has been ongoing for the last decade. And it really helps us to take a step back and look at what the work that we've been doing for the last decade with respect to interconnection, peering interconnection and traffic exchange in Africa looks like. My name's Michuki Mwangi. I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon, and I'd like to just welcome you to join us today. We have a great set of speakers, and I hope that you will be able to take away something that's useful from this session. So let's start with the objective of this session. So as you all know, we've had the work of the peering and interconnection going on for quite a number of years, the work especially here at the Internet Society. And so we're looking to present the report, which sort of looks at the 80-20 initiative, which is the goal that the community took on after it was shared across by the Internet Society, of having 80% of the traffic locally accessible and 20% coming from outside the region. And so we'd like to see, based on the study that has been done, what were the findings, what were the things that we'll be able to learn from the study itself or the report itself, the lessons, and what are the next steps going forward. So we hope that Michael is going to be able to share with us what are the things that he learned through it. And the one thing that we are quite happy about having Michael do this is because there's the papers that are actually preceding this that sort of set the stage for this report of the Kenya and Nigeria studies were done by Michael. So he has good background with respect to the study itself. We're ready to get started, and without further ado, I'd like to invite our colleague from Facebook, that's Andrew Basket. Andrew Basket is the Edge Strategy Manager at Facebook, and he's also been a very good partner and collaborator with us here at the Internet Society, having initiated our partnership project with Facebook going back to 2018 actually, and that's looking at the IXP development work, which started in Africa, and now the project has been expanded, covering Latin America and the Asia Pacific. And prior to joining Facebook, Andrew worked at Akamai, and that's where we really got a chance to work with him along the work that we've done in Africa. And we're really excited that through him and Facebook, we've been able to collaborate on this study. So Andrew, please welcome and give us a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Michuki. It's so exciting to represent Facebook and our support for the Internet Society and be part of this session. For those that might not know, at Facebook, our mission is to connect everyone, and we invest in foundational and transformative technology and initiatives to support that in order to bring more people online to a faster, open, more reliable, and efficient internet. So in that sense, Facebook's interest and the Internet Society and our community are very, very closely aligned. I had a chance to review the report and work with the team on it, and I'm just so impressed by it and what the industry has accomplished so far. And it's so great to have Michael work on a lot of these reports and have that continuity that you mentioned, Michuki. So I'm just so happy and looking forward to everyone's feedback on how this went. So thinking back to my first African Peering and Interconnection Forum in 2012, the interconnection ecosystem was significantly different. Facebook had very little traffic served locally in the continent and no physical infrastructure. Fast forward to today, Facebook is present in over 20 internet exchanges in Africa alone. and support more than 90% of our traffic from within Africa. It will be impossible to do this and achieve these results without these efforts and the growth of IXPs across the region. So everyone involved in the community had a role in that, which is great to just think about as we look forward to even more challenges in the future. So while large infrastructure investments like subsea cables and co-location facilities and major fiber corridors often grab headlines, collaboration between people coming together to interconnect these networks enables us to make this infrastructure live and active and use it, and makes all of these online services that we love and rely on perform well and be more reliable. So I'm really excited to see what people think about the report, which I believe will anchor many of the conversations we need to have with the community, industry, and policy collaborators. And it's even more important that we work closely together to improve the resiliency of the African internet as we look toward the next set of challenges that we'll have. So with that, it's a pleasure to hand it over to back to you, Michuki, and Jane and Dawit.
Thank you, Andrew. So next up, I'd like to invite my colleague, Dawit Bekele. Dawit is the Regional Vice President for Africa. At the very start of the work, going back, the interconnection and traffic exchange work, going back to 2010, Dawit was pretty much the person in charge of the development work in Africa, and we worked very well with him in a lot of the work we did on developing AFPIF, the community, and the IXP work. And I would like to just give him that opportunity to sort of share his perspectives as well, based on where we are and how he has seen that evolution. Over to you, Dawit.
Thank you, Michuki. Good morning, good afternoon. As Michuki has said, it's been over 10 years that we have been working on the interconnection and traffic exchange program. And as you can imagine, when you are on such a long journey, sometimes you wonder whether you are having impact, whether you are in the right direction, and so on. And I have to say that this study comes at the very right time. In fact, it shows us a little bit of, it works as a compass. It tells us whether we are going in the right direction or not. And I have to say that it has shown us, and you are going to read the report, that we have made quite a few achievements. And when I say us, I mean ISOC, but also our partners and the IXP community at large. For example, when we initially came up with the idea of 80% local traffic exchange by 2020, that was about 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly the percentage, but it was maybe 10% or 20% of the traffic exchange locally. So that goal seemed unrealistic, and frankly, at the very best, it was audacious. And I have to say that the study has shown us that we might have not reached the goal everywhere, but we did reach or approached it at least in 3 countries: South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. While if we have not reached in other countries, at least I think there is a momentum, and I hope that we can do it in the coming years. This success has been possible thanks to the IXP community around Africa, as well as organizations such as ISOC, AFIX, African Union Commission, Facebook, but many others that I won't mention here because there are many who have worked tirelessly to achieve those goals. But before I finish, because Jane will talk more about the report, I guess, I would like to congratulate the author, Michael Kende, as mentioned, who has been behind the first report, but also this new one, for the great work, my colleague Michuki and Jane for their leadership, as well as many other colleagues who are here, who have contributed in some way or another for the success of this report. The IXPs, 23 of them have been involved, and the IXP community at large and FIX. Also, a big thank you to Facebook and especially Andrew Basket, who has been with us through the whole journey and also has supported this study. Last and not least, thank you to all of you who have joined this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawit. One thing that most people may not know, the whole 80-20 vision or the statement was actually Dawit's trigger. He came and said, why don't we have a very bold statement like objective that we work towards? And if you remember, around the time there was the whole what was it called? The UN Millennium Development Goals for 2015. And Dawit's thought was like, we should have something as big and as audacious as that. So when we said it, he said, no, that's too ambitious. But it's good that we try and aim. But yes, so I just want to recognize that Dawit's trigger and challenge to us as a team to come up with something very bold and ambitious that we can go out to the community with led to sort of us being here where we are today. Thank you, Dawit. Next, I would like to give the opportunity to Jane Coffin. Jane Coffin is our Senior Vice President for Internet Growth. And most of you probably have met Jane in one way or the other, but she's probably our go-getter person who is responsible for the Internet Society's growth project teams. And under the growth project teams, we focus on community networks, interconnection and traffic, IXPs, peering, community development, and also a very interesting new project called Internet Measurement, which is looking at the health of the internet. She's also been involved in this work. She joined the Internet Society in 2012 and took over from where we were working with our colleague, Karen Rose, who some of you may know. And so she's sort of taken on that mantle and carried it forward and made sure that all the goals and visions that we had sort of laid out at the very beginning are realized. So over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Michuki, and thank you everyone for being here. This webinar really helps encapsulate and show the world the importance of the continuity we've established at the Internet Society with our partners, and a big thank you to all our partners, but the continuity of working with Michael and working with all of you to show the importance of internet exchange points, interconnection, and the communities to support them. We have had, over the years, many debates about how to move forward and improve what we do as we go. And Dawit and Michuki led the way with the innovation of 80-20 by 2020. And by setting those goals, we had benchmarks. We were looking at findings and data to improve what we do. And as many know out there, data is critical to proving your point, to proving that building infrastructure, it improves GDP, your domestic product, it helps with economics, and it builds that foundational technical infrastructure that Andrew mentioned earlier. And I just want to say that when you're looking at that foundational technology, you need to build the people, the human networks to sustain the technical networks. So this is a partnership to build the skills and the infrastructure to improve lives, to improve technology, to improve traffic flows. So it's not just about the data, it's about the local circumstances as well, to build a bigger regional and global community of interconnected networks for better data flows and for better, as I said before, GDP. So that's why Dawit and Michuki set those goals. They created the benchmarks. So we've got the findings in this report, which Michael will speak about, just as a snapshot for you, there are 47 IXPs according to FIX right now in Africa, in 43 cities in 33 countries. When I first started at the Internet Society, I believe that number was 17. There is a direct corollary in the impact with the community of effort at the Internet Society, where there are partners like Facebook and other content delivery networks, internet service providers, IXPs across the continent, but also governments who have helped us and supported this with their policies. And Michael will tell you more about why that's important to enable the local environment, the regional environment, and to build a stronger internet. The bottom line is that there has been change. And that's due to the work that many have done. Dawit mentioned a lot of those organizations. It's very important to realize that it's an interconnected network of partners as well. That's part of that foundational, along with the foundational technology, it's foundational partners and foundational support. So I would just close by saying that you're going to hear about the enabling factors that are so important to develop the infrastructure. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the community. We can't do this alone, and the Internet Society often says that we do not want to be a single point of failure as a partner. Like in a technical network, you don't need single points of failure. You certainly don't want that as a partner. So thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to all of the great people who worked on this report and to everyone in the community. Things have really changed. And just a quick note, when we do set a goal, the objective is to figure out how did we get there? What did we learn? And what can we do to improve? So congratulations to the team and to the partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. So then the moment is here. So I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Michael. Michael, well, there's a lot to say about Michael, but essentially he's our go-to expert on matters IXP. I'll do a plug-in for him. He recently had a book. I don't know whether it will be visible with my background on. Let me see. Choose background to be none. And he had this, The Flip Side of Free, which is by Michael Kende, Understanding the Economics of the Internet. I think it's a really good book. I started reading it. Thank you, Michael. And he's been a great partner for all the studies that we've done, and I believe with through that collaboration and partnership we've had with him, we've gotten to this point. So without taking too much more of the time, we have Michael, over to you to take us through what the report summary and findings are.
Good afternoon. Well, thank you so much for those kind words and for the unexpected book plug. That's appreciated. But no, more importantly, thanks to Facebook and in particular Internet Society for not just supporting this project, but more importantly, all of the valuable work on this initiative over the years. And the first time I went to AFPIF, I think, was the same year that Andrew did, and I was really struck by the 80-20 goal, and it's really been a pleasure personally and professionally to work with the team on kind of tracking this over the years with these studies. So thanks so much for that. And without further ado, let's start the slides and look at the results of this study. So moving toward an interconnected Africa as part of this initiative, and we can talk a little bit about the goal and the next steps, but next slide, please. So I think this is a fundamental statement about the value of the internet exchange points that we're trying to document here, as they really anchor the development of the system, the ecosystem across the countries and regions, and show their value. And that's been a lot of the part of the work that we've been doing in these reports. So I won't spend too much time on this slide. It's been talked about, but we have this 80-20 rule, that 80% of internet traffic would be locally accessible or localized. That doesn't mean it's all created in Africa, but it originates and terminates within a country or region of Africa, which is very important for the development of the ecosystem, as we'll see with one of the next slides. The internet exchange points are key to meeting this, and the ITE program has really helped to realize this goal. As Michuki and others mentioned, there have been the two studies kind of 2012 and 2020, looking at the benefits of the exchange points in Kenya and Nigeria. I'll summarize those results in a moment. And what this study does is really looks at a number of different levels. There's a bird's eye view of all of the IXPs in Africa, which Jane mentioned. Then we sent out a survey that was completed by the IXPs, a number of them, and then we chose to do a deep dive on one country in each subregion, in each of the 6 Afrinic subregions of Africa. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who provided inputs to the surveys and to the deep dives. It was truly a community effort. I think that drives all of this work, and that was true here as well. The paper itself has a very lengthy acknowledgement section. I'd like to read it here, but it would probably take half the time because everyone really pitched in, answered a lot of questions, and provided a lot of the insights and feedback on this report. And that's, you can see the strength of it throughout this report. So thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary of the first 2 studies, the ones on Kenya and Nigeria. What we really tried to highlight was measure the benefits of an IXP. As you know, the IXPs save on using international IP transit to exchange traffic and access content. And what we did in these studies was try and measure that. And we found 3 benefits. The first was the expected one, that there's a big cost savings of not having to use IP transit to exchange traffic abroad. But we also found in the first study that by reducing the latency of traffic exchange, there was an increase in the usage of content. And I think the insight in this study was, since a lot of the data packages were per megabyte, that there was actually increased revenues for the ISPs as a result. So it was really a win-win-win for the consumers, the ISPs, and the content providers that were providing content. And you can see on the right some of the benefits and how they changed over the years from 2012 to 2020. In particular, the cost savings were enormous because of the amount of traffic that was able to be exchanged locally. Next slide, please. And so in the 2020 study, we came up with these 3 stages of development for an IXP, saying that in the first stage, up to 30% of traffic is localized, and that's where Kenya and Nigeria were in 2012. And that's really localized ISPs exchanging traffic, a few maybe governments, educational or other local providers exchanging content through the IXP. Then the next stage takes the amount of localized traffic up to 70%. And that's where international content providers start to put caches and content into the country, exchanged through the IXP for the most part, and regional ISPs start to connect, and the IXP starts to turn into a bit of a hub, which is certainly the case for Kenya and Nigeria, which were at 70% in that last study. And then the final stage is stage 3, where you get up to 80% and higher, which South Africa's at, and that's where you really get a lot more of the international content, as well as more and more local content being not just generated in the country, but hosted in the country and exchanged through the IXP. So that's the real goal. Next slide, please. So now turning to some of the findings for this report. Next slide. We actually tracked 48 IXPs, a couple that were not members of AFIX, of the Internet Exchange group that Jane had mentioned. And as she mentioned, more than half the countries, 33 have an IXP, 6 have more than one, but that still leaves 20 without, and I realize the math is off there, but there were 20 without an IXP when we did the study. And what's interesting here is you can see in the graph there, the number of IXPs generated within each time frame. And it really started to accelerate in the last 2 time frames. And that really was when the ITE activities started, the 80-20 rule goal was developed, AFPIF started, the African Union started to pitch in, and now, of course, the partnership has grown and grown. So it shows that these efforts really did pay off, and that they should be continued and, if possible, even augmented going forward to really increase the number of IXPs so that every country has one and more countries have more than one IXP or node of an IXP. Next, please. So here we have a metric that we really focus on in this study, and that's the number of connected networks in an IXP. Now, the minimum number, if you think about it, in an IXP is 3. Obviously, if there's one network doesn't need an IXP, 2 networks is a bilateral exchange. So it's only when you have 3 or more that there start to be savings from using one link to a central place and exchanging traffic there. And towards the left side of this graph, and I'm sorry for the size of the font, but you can read it pretty clearly in the report, but towards the left, there's a couple that are at 3 or 4 connected networks. And then as you move to the right, there are 2 that Kenya and Nigeria have more than 50 members. And then the ones in Africa are at in South Africa at the far right with up to 400 members, connected networks. And the point we're trying to make is that the connected networks may be a more relevant metric for an IXP than just the amount of traffic. The reason being, in some of the data centers where there's nodes of IXPs, there's a lot of private traffic exchange. So that wouldn't be measured by the peak traffic measure, which is a common measure of the value or effect of an IXP. So privately exchanged traffic won't be measured, but all those networks, for some of their traffic at least, will connect to the exchange, so that it's still picked up in that important number of how many networks are connected. Next slide, please. So the number of connected networks is determined by a number of factors or enablers. The first is, in many countries, the ISPs and MNOs, access networks together, are typically the foundation. They want to save money by not sending all of their traffic abroad just to bring it back, exchange it at a foreign IXP and bring it back. So typically a group of access networks will get together, form an IXP. And the more ISPs there are in a country, because it's been liberalized and there's a lot of competition, the more access networks there will be. So that's the kind of the first step is a liberalized market creates a lot of access networks that could connect. But that's really the lower bound of the number of members. Looking at, in Kenya, the IXP, when we counted, had 4 MNOs and 9 ISPs, and there was a little overlap there out of more than 50 connected networks. So it wasn't just access networks, it's content providers, international carriers, governments, enterprises, academic institutions can all connect. And so what you need is, beyond just a lot of liberalized telecom regulations, is a content environment that helps to attract international content providers, content delivery networks to put their caches in a country to deliver content, and the generation of local content, users, governments, and others. And that should be hosted locally. That means you need a local data center that's affordable and reliable so that people can put their content locally and exchange it through the IXP. And often that's the same place. The IXP might have a node within the data center. And that total number of networks connected is a clear reflection of the health of the ecosystem, the internet ecosystem. Next slide, please. But finally, you may have a lot of networks in a country, a lot of networks with AS numbers, autonomous system numbers. But then the final piece of the puzzle is the IXP rules, regulations, requirements that determine how many will ultimately join. So in some countries, there are rules that really try and restrict membership to ISPs and have content providers and others sitting behind them. That might limit the number of connected members. Some providers don't like to connect where there's a mandatory multilateral peering agreement because they like to choose who they peer with, so that may restrict membership. Conversely, being in a carrier-neutral data center may make it easier to join, and particularly if there's a choice of where to join. Different nodes offers some choice, and people in the data center can easily join the IXP. The cost of the IXP is of course important, but if you look at the graph at the right, it's not as important as you might think. So vertically, you have the annual connection cost of an IXP it's the annual cost, but over 3 years to take into account the joining fee, the annual fee, and the monthly port fee. And to the horizontally is the number of connected networks. Now you see some like in South Africa that are free, that have a lot of connected members, which you would expect. But there's a number of them that have very low cost that don't have that many members on the lower left. And the ones that are over 50, other than South Africa and Kenya and Nigeria, have annual fees that are roughly in the middle. So there are some fees. People are still connecting. And the idea is that no matter what the cost is, and it should be low, it should be affordable, you're always going to save money. In all the cases we looked at, it's cheaper to connect to the IXP than to send your traffic abroad to be exchanged. And the final piece is to really focus on awareness and capacity building. That was the focus of a lot of the survey questions and work we did in the deep dive countries, particularly now with lockdowns and it's not possible to travel and bring people together. The focus on getting awareness from all potential networks, all potential members, and building up the capacity is very important. And that's a clear area to focus on. Next slide, please. So this next slide, I think, is really a highlight and something to be remembered from this report. And it's saying the following, that of course every new network will add to the total amount of traffic, because they'll bring traffic to the IXP that's exchanged. But what's interesting here is that it's not just every new network on average increases the total amount of traffic per network. So it's very generative. So the blue line shows the number of connected networks over time at NAP Africa on the left and in Uganda at the right. So as those numbers increase, the green line, which is peak traffic per member per connected network, is also going up. So that's showing that there's this very generative result of increasing the number of networks. The total amount of traffic increases so much that the average per network increases. And that really suggests there's going to be a very strong correlation between the number of connected networks in a country or at an IXP and the achievement of the localization 80-20 goal. And in fact, the one country that's at 80% or more, South Africa, has well over 400 connected networks at one of its IXPs. And the two other countries that are at 70%, Nigeria and Kenya, both have over 50 connected networks. So that shows that it's a really important number to focus on increasing the amount of connected networks to increase the amount of traffic exchanged per network. Next slide, please. So then we sent out the surveys. We sent them out to at the time, the 46 members of the association. And we received 23 responses, so half responded, which is a good response rate for a survey like this. Everyone's quite busy. So we were pleased with that. And the results were very positive. The directors, and you can see summaries of the results in the report, but the directors of the IXPs were very positive, that there's good awareness of IXPs for the most part, that there's relatively few policy impediments to joining the IXP other than the cost of telecom links, suggesting some countries could still liberalize a little more, and strong sentiment that capacity building needs to be increased. In the interest of time, I won't run through all the results on the right, except for the bottom one, that local content is still on the right-hand side, that there still could be much more local content generated and hosted in the country, and that'll really increase the number of networks joining the IXP. And the amount of traffic exchange there, as we just saw. Next slide, please. So finally, we did these deep dives on 6 case study countries. Next slide. And as I said, we used we chose one country in each of the Afrinic regions that are on the far left there. You can see the countries in the next one. There's a relatively broad range of internet users, percentage per in the countries going from 18% to 67%, which is somewhat linked to the different stages of economic development of the countries. That there's quite a range of development for these countries. 2 of the countries had 2 IXPs or 2 nodes of IXPs with a varying number of members. The other thing we were really looking for was language diversity. So Angola, of course, Portuguese, 2 French-speaking countries, Francophone countries, an Arabic country. 2 of them were landlocked, Burkina Faso and Rwanda, and 1 was an island, Mauritius. So we really took a range of countries along a number of different metrics to be able to get some generalized results. And the one number you can see here is that based on the amount of traffic exchanged at the IXP, there were fairly significant savings in many of the countries. The highest in Egypt, where there was just a huge increase in the amount of traffic exchanged when they went to 10 gig ports. So 5 members, the 5 ISPs in the country, exchanging quite a bit of traffic with significant savings based on the cost of international transit. But all of the countries had some savings. Mauritius, with the least amount of traffic exchanged, had, of course, unfortunately, the lowest savings, but still some savings. And then the other parts are, of course, increased usage based on the lower latency, which we weren't able to measure, but is typically always there. Next slide, please. I won't go into this in detail. There's at least a page or 2 about each of the countries, and it pulls out some recommendations for those countries, looking at what, roughly who's connected at the IXP, the amount of traffic, and then recommendations. I think the recommendations really come down to several that are roughly in line with the surveys as well, that the cost of accessing the international IP transit and to some degree the cost of backbone within the country is still relatively high, raising the cost of bringing content into the country, even if it goes to a cache. So that can be lowered with more competition. A lot of discussion about increasing awareness to bring in more members. One of the things that we really highlighted was the value of a good website for the IXP. It really gave a lot of information and a lot of links, particularly in these times where meetings aren't possible. Some of the countries were very successful bringing together members and potential members for awareness and capacity building. When that's not possible, the website has to stand in to some degree, and that can be highlighted and improved in a number of the countries to really emphasize the value of the IXP. Next slide, please. A note quickly on the content delivery networks. They're a very important source of traffic. Some of them are providing their own content, such as Facebook and Google, and others like Akamai are carrying third-party content. Some of them are platforms, so that they're an important source of local content as well as international content. So you would call, for instance, Facebook or YouTube international providers, but a lot of the content exchanged is local content, people, friends, family, businesses exchanging content with each other within the country. So it's an important source of local content as well, or at least locally relevant content. 3 of the CDNs, the international CDNs, were kind enough to provide us with data that really highlighted, for the 6 countries, that really highlighted the value of a local cache for lowering latency and increasing throughput. And I'd just like to show the graph on the right is for Burkina Faso. And it shows, the blue line shows how much of the traffic within the country for that provider was provided from the local cache. And as that blue line went up and up and up, the green line, which is the total amount of traffic from that CDN into the country, whether local or international, also went up, highlighting the value of making the content available locally, lowers the latency, increases the usage, and increases the total amount of traffic. So that was quite a good finding, and really highlighted the value of localizing traffic, localizing content. Final slide, please. And then we've summarized all of this into this graph of the membership enablers, how to increase the number of members, which will then increase the amount of traffic per member, is reform the market to have the most possible ISPs, have the connectivity international and within the country to bring the content in and to allow providers, regional and local providers, to connect to the IXP, content regulations to attract the international CDNs, generate more local content and have it available to connect through the IXP. Then finally, the IXP policies that are liberalized to allow all of these different members to join the IXP. And that's what generates the member number, which generates the local traffic. So with that, I will conclude. And again, thank you to everyone who was involved, who sponsored and helped to create this, this report, which hopefully will be a very useful step in looking forward at what the next realistic goal is for the traffic exchange community and how to achieve it. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Michuki. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for that summary and overview of the recommendations and findings. I think it certainly gives a very good picture of where we are as a continent, and certainly also the recommendations on what we really need to do. And I think I'll sort of just like to pick up from where you've, the last point which you've raised as we go into the Q&A session, and ask you from an expert point of view, and of course, happy to hear what Andrew's thoughts are, and maybe Jane and Dawit is, you know, what should the community be thinking from the next goal? What should be the next goal be looking like, or what should be the focus of the community from that perspective?
From my perspective, I think the goal, at least the 80 part of it, is still a good one. I would tie it to Jane's new initiative, the Internet Measurement Initiative, all of your new initiative, because you know, there's a famous quote: "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it." So to really try and get a handle on traffic exchange within the IXP's total amount of traffic, to really be able to measure it better. And I think that will help to kind of pinpoint where, you know, some real changes can take place and help to achieve the goal.
I would agree with Michael. More data. And if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, as Michael and others have said. I'd say a roadmap, maybe. I'm not sure what we could call it, but another set of goals and something to aim at. It's always good for coming back to people and saying, we had this target, we met these objectives, we saw what happened. And I think, Michael, the really critical thing about part of your report is the enablers. If you do not have that framework in place, you cannot get better competition, opening up of the submarine cable, the gateways and cross-border gateways. And so I see this as a way to look at enabling environment, as well as moving forward with better data collection. But over to you, Andrew.
I think that was all well stated. Of course, different regions and countries will be in different stages. And one thing we've been thinking about the past year since COVID hit is even more so on the reliability aspects of the infrastructure. So not only our own infrastructure, which of course we can have additional paths and we can do what we can from an investment standpoint to support that. But what we know to be true is that so many countries are reliant on only a few international connectivity links. What are the next steps that we can think about to at least be aware of what those are? So one of our team's major goals is to improve the reliability of our services. And when thinking about the data, we have data on our own reliability of our network infrastructure, but it's hard to tell if we're sharing the same fallback paths as the wider industry. There's not really a data source for that. We know that from relationships and talking to people. And we think of that as a big risk, not only from just a pure how many paths are there, perspective, who's controlling those? If it's just one or two players, is that an issue or not? But also, I think about the interconnection of the continent, and that will help us so much in terms of thinking about Africa as an internet that stands on its own, that's not reliant on Europe or other regions. And I think that's the next step when thinking about, okay, do we need these international links? Well, we shouldn't. The internet is already here. So that's sort of the next step in my view. But of course, each specific scenario may have its own intricacies, of course.
Thank you for that feedback. So I'll invite those who have questions to post them. And so I see we have one question that's coming in from Brian Uzoechi. What's being done for the 20 countries in Africa that don't have an IXP yet? Jane, do you want to try that?
I think that's you, my friend.
Yes, so so I can quickly say that we are certainly working with all the countries that don't have internet exchange points. Our goal is to certainly see an internet exchange point in every possible market. We know some difficult because of the prevailing policy and regulatory environment. For instance, some countries only have one operator. Ethiopia was a good example, but it's now transitioning to where there will be multiple operators, so that will allow an opportunity for there to be more. That's very similar to a question that's in the Q&A room, which is about Comoros, for instance, and there are only 2 operators in Comoros. So as we've seen, we'll need at least a minimum of 3 operators for us to be able to support the country to set up an internet exchange point, or at least for an exchange point to be viable. And so the more operators and the better the environment will be, the more possible it will be to have an internet exchange point. So there is work that's been ongoing for some countries for many more years than we would like to talk about, but we certainly do see some result at the end of it. So I'll pause there and then maybe give the opportunity to Dawit, whose hand is up.
Thank you, Michuki. As you said, we are here to help. There is a saying in my local language that says, you can bring the horse to the water point, but you cannot make it drink. So what we do is help any country that wants to have an IXP, but we cannot do it without local champions, without the country being ready. And the very good example is my own country, Ethiopia, where we have spent the last 2 years or so to develop an IXP, but the country should be ready. So my advice, so if you come from a country where there is no IXP, please try to gather the forces internally, and when you're ready, we are here to help.
Thank you, Dawit. So there's another question here from Ben Roberts, which I think is very interesting with respect to, we've seen some of the developments in the recent past where Nigeria put a ban on a regular popular internet service, which is pushing users to use VPNs. And we've seen some other countries implementing DPIs or deep packet inspection solutions. And all those are pushing users onto VPN services. As a result, it means that users are not benefiting from the local content or the traffic that's actually locally available, because with VPNs, they're now appearing to be in other locations. So how do we make interventions to block this from undoing all the hard work that's been put in place to achieve the 80%? Anyone?
I mean, I'm sure others have thoughts on this. I mean, I think that these reports were really all conceived in a positive approach. What's the benefit of more local traffic exchange, of more content providers, of more connected members? I think there has to be at least awareness that people have to understand the negative impacts of going the other way, especially when, as Ben said, you have a country like Nigeria, which is reaching 80%. And then suddenly is getting to this level. And I think that's really a combination of understanding what VPNs are doing to the traffic exchange and what the cost is for the total ecosystem, particularly for a country that really could lay claims to being a regional hub for traffic, and what that might do to other goals. But it's really kind of flipping it around into thinking of things as more subtractive than additive. But I think that that's a necessary part of awareness building.
I think also there's a lot in what Ben said here. I think there's some political questions there in terms of what is your political risk strategy from a network infrastructure perspective, and that means if all of your infrastructure is in one particular market, that does represent a potential risk if that market decides that they're going to control or adjust what they're doing from a DPI perspective. But also, if we think about what's happened in other markets from a VPN perspective, VPN providers also have infrastructure within various locations. So there's no reason why these VPN providers can't build out infrastructure into Africa in the future. Maybe today that's too cost prohibitive, or different markets, they aren't able to reach particular KPIs that they're looking for. So I think there's an aspect of growth from African internet perspective that will minimize the effects of some of the questions, but also there are wider implications of various organizations building privacy products that do result in VPN type traffic behavior, and that's a good question to see how open those VPN providers are to help put in the hooks to make the content capable to be served as locally as possible. So a lot of questions there, but I think the more that we make it cost effective and reasonable for these services to be supported locally, then hopefully that will be adopted by the VPN providers and people that you choose to use VPNs.
Thank you. Dawit, is your hand up or?
No, I forgot to.
Okay. All right. So we have another question and we're running out of time. So which is from Megan. How will data localization and discussions around digital sovereignty affect IXPs? And this is directed to Michael.
It's a great question. And it's a challenging one because, if you're saying to someone, whether or not the 80-20 number has ever gotten to some of these politicians, saying try and localize traffic, then the easiest way to do that is to force it all to be localized. But I think politicians world over are never really that good at second order effects. And the second order effect in this case is that the data localization probably isn't going to meet any of the goals that you want. It'll lower the amount of traffic that's in the country because It requires a significant investment in every country that has those requirements. And so some companies may just choose not to invest in the country if the market doesn't look like it's going to get big enough, because they don't want to reinvest the same everywhere. The value of data, a lot of it is to bring it together, to be able to analyze it and learn from it and get economies of scale. So those aren't going to be met. It may not be more secure than having it in a cloud, a very secure cloud network, because everyone knows where all the data is if it has to be localized. But again, it's a hard message because everyone likes sovereignty. That's what nations are, and when they're told the value of data and local traffic exchange, it seems like a good solution. So that's a great question, and it's a challenging one. But I think one has to just go after every point of what the justification is and show that it's not going to likely meet any of them.
I think the study is a great way to begin that dialogue or continue that dialogue with policymakers, so they're able to develop to foster a good data regulatory environment to encourage investment.
Yeah, and I would say we have to separate the issues of infrastructure build out from those issues of what happens once you have that content. I appreciate the digital sovereignty issue greatly, as others have said, but we know that more infrastructure and localized infrastructure leads to better socioeconomic development. And to Andrew's point, it means a lot of different things from the policy and regulatory side too. But if we can separate the let's build infrastructure from what do we do once it's built, we really do need more infrastructure built. So I think I'd look at it that way and take Michael's suggestion to separate out the issues and then look at the enablers.
Okay. Thank you. So we are suddenly running out of time, and I see we still have a few more questions to answer. And so in the interest of time, what we'll do is we'll take those questions and we'll try and respond to them directly, and or at least get the expert to respond to you. So next up, we suddenly just want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to leave here with the report. So just as a note, we've seen quite a number of issues that have come up for conversation that we need to take forward. The question about the future of the vision, what should happen to it. I think there's a great question that came in from Ben Roberts with respect to, are there people making decisions that could be undoing all the efforts that are happening? And so we'd like to invite all of you to join us at the next conversation platforms where we can have discussions or follow-on conversations, the Central Asia Peering Forum, virtual peering series, that's taking place on the 13th of July. We have the West Africa Peering Forum that's on the 29th of July. And we have the virtual peering series that will be on the 3rd of August. All these are lined up for us to take advantage and carry on these conversations about peering and interconnection in Africa and beyond. We are also looking for program committee members to help join the AFPIF program committee. And again, that will certainly help boost the conversations with the expertise from the community. So last and not least is to give you the opportunity to take a snapshot of that QR code. That is where we have the report. And as you're doing so, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the people who have really played their role in supporting the reproduction of this report. Suddenly start with thanking Michael for all his tireless effort and working with us, and agreeing to work with us again one more time to produce this report, to write this report. And then our partners, Facebook, for certainly having the faith in us that we can be able to pull this through. We got a lot of support from AFIX and the Internet Exchange Points in Africa, and all those individuals who actually contributed and took their time to participate in grueling interviews in this time of the pandemic. All of them had to be done online. So, and time zones and all that, the challenges challenges of having to do it that way was not easy. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for all the contributions. I'd also like to thank the ISOC leadership, Jane, Dawit, our CEO, for really approving that this can actually get done. And of course, we have a strong team at the Internet Society, led by a comms person, Israel, and Gila, Masema, Ivana, a couple of others from the comms team who really played an important role to make sure that the report got to this stage. My hat's off to you. It was not an easy task to pull through. So thank you for all your teamwork, collaboration, and really to all our partners out there. Thank you again. We always say that the work of IXP development and interconnection is about partners. And we are certainly here because of all the collaboration and the partnership we've had. I'd also like to mention that we have the French version coming out. So the French, the interpreted version, thanks to our colleagues Masema and Gila for making sure that this is done. And so we should be actually having that ready before the end of this week. So the English is ready. The French will be coming out shortly, so please pay attention to this space and you'll be able to go to the website and download it. And we're also inviting you to join us in those future forums where we can have that further discussion and more detailed conversations around the findings of this report and what we should be thinking about as the next future goal for the 80-20 goal initiative. So thank you very much for all your time. We're 6 minutes over time, and we do appreciate you taking time to join us today, and look forward to the conversations going online in the social media platform and all other spaces available. Thank you. Do have a good rest of your day, wherever you are. And thank you again for all the support and collaboration. See you next time. Thank you.